Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel and Gerry Hamilton of On Texas Football. This episode of Rapid Reactions brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. Gerry and CJ, quite a day yesterday in the Cotton Bowl. Longhorns emerged victorious 34-3, a resounding victory for the Longhorns, guys. Really, game was clinched early third quarter, maybe going even into halftime. But a play by Silas Bolden, followed by a play by Anthony Hill, followed by a run by Trey Wisner, and all of a sudden, Texas was on its way. It was a bunch of big plays back to back to back that led Texas to victory on Saturday. And then that defense of the Longhorns just absolutely suffocating. We're going to talk about all of that and more in this episode of Rapid Reactions. CJ, you were there in the press box, then down on the field after the game. What were your initial thoughts about the Longhorns coming off that win on Saturday?
It didn't necessarily feel like a pretty game for the Longhorns, right? Especially after that first quarter, as sluggish as it was, Texas found ways to move the football against a good Oklahoma defense, and they found ways to keep Oklahoma from moving the football themselves. So in that own regard, I thought the keys were to establish some sort of running game. Trey Wisner did that. Kick on every drive after the first possession. Texas did a very fine job, in my eyes, of figuring out ways to either punt, kick a field goal, or kick a PAT. And then, of course, protect the football. And again, after that first drive and that sluggish start to the game, Texas did just that. And they didn't allow Oklahoma after the first quarter to have short fields. And as we saw, they are not a good football team offensively right now. They don't have an identity in that Texas defense. Again, a shout out to them. 6 games in, Bobby, 3 touchdowns allowed. Pretty darn good. I don't know how much more we need to see, maybe after this Georgia game coming up and depending on how they look there. But we might be in the conversation, or at least starting that conversation, for an all-time Texas defense with what we're seeing so far in 2024.
Well, I will say it's the best that we've seen in a long time. I don't know about all time because they have still, CJ, yet to see a quarterback that really can pass muster, in my opinion. They'll get considerably better coming up this week against Georgia. Gerry Hamilton joins us as well. Gerry, what did you think? What were your rapid reactions to this butt whipping in Big D?
Just think about the difference in offensive line. And this is why high school recruiting and developing those guys, and how big that 2022 class was for Sark. When they didn't go to their B list of targets, they stayed on the guys they knew they had to have these type of seasons and win these types of games. Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, going to be first rounders. Both those guys are going to be first round picks. I've been teetering on it. I'm saying it now. Cam Williams is going to be a first round pick. DJ Campbell. I mean, look, Cole Hudson. And then look at Oklahoma trying to patch it together in the portal. And Bill Bedenbaugh is a very good coach, a miracle worker. He is not. And that is a big difference in these programs right now, the way I see it, is it's been high school development with Kyle Flood, and they have depth at that position. And then you look at Oklahoma and you say, they've started 4 different combinations. Maybe it's 5 after Saturday. But they are a far cry on the offensive line from what they once were at Oklahoma. And that was a major glaring difference going into the game. And I think the game played out that way. And then for Texas, another one of my big thoughts on this was, we've seen Colin Simmons be a factor rushing the quarterback. We've seen Anthony Hill be a factor rushing the quarterback. But now 2 straight weeks we've seen a team be a factor rushing a quarterback. Ethan Burke, interior guys. Michael Taff on a safety blitz. 11 sacks in 2 weeks. You're seeing multiple guys get to the quarterback. That is a sign of where Texas can go defensively. Now, next week, this stuff starts for real for the Texas defense. It gets real next week, but how many get reals weeks are there actually for the Texas defense? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I understand where you're going with that. I think that if I were to add anything to what y'all just talked about, it is that Texas is playing complementary football even when they don't know they are.
Yeah.
Like on Saturday, the offense came out sputtering, no doubt about it. But the defense was immediately suffocating. I mean, they held Oklahoma to 2 field goal attempts after giving the ball up to them around the 50-yard line twice, and not allowing them to really get anything going at all was just huge, in my opinion, and one of the reasons why Texas won the game. We're going to talk about a couple other things here, including this is always a game where legends are made, and there was a few of those on Saturday. Maybe we'll talk about those guys next. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. That's Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, and need a consultation with an attorney, give Adam and his group a shout. LowyLawFirm.com. Thank you, Adam, for your sponsorship of On Texas Football. Legends are made. Look, Silas Bolden is a transfer to the University of Texas. Tell me he didn't make one of the biggest plays that you can make on that stage because of how it was made and why he made it. And I'm not talking about the punt return. I'm talking about the fumble recovery. You know what I mean? It's not even within his realm of what he's supposed to be doing on the football field, but that's such a winning play that encapsulates why you play football in the first place and what it's all about. Teamwork. And he showed it.
And the other thing was, there's a couple of thoughts on this, and I talked about it during our watch with us, is how many wide receivers had actually been there to make that play on the fumble recovery? He was blocking on that run play 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He was 20 yards behind that play at one point in time. How many receivers actually go and end up being in a position to make that fumble recovery? That was the Jordan Whittington play from TCU last year in a different way.
Absolutely, Gerry. Absolutely.
And the other thing about that is this kid transferred from Oregon State to Texas. He probably thought he was going to come in and catch 50 balls for 700 yards this year. It has not gone the way he thought it was. If there was any player that you said, you know what? Maybe it hadn't gone his way. How bought in is he really? He wants a big return, but he's not really getting the ball on offense. I don't know, but we know how Sark is. Silas Bolden's about to be Sark's about to start giving him some targets because that was a huge play for Texas football Saturday.
I completely agree. And CJ, you talked to those guys in post game. What did Sark have to say about Silas Bolden's efforts on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, he echoed very much what Gerry just said there. It's a guy who transferred over, probably expected a little bit of a larger role in this offense, and it's not necessarily gone his way when the ball is in his, direction. But again, it's plays like that, and it's the buy-in, even when the stats don't necessarily line up with what maybe was expected coming into the year, that, again, kind of encapsulates what this team is about and how this culture has been built from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and now what we're seeing today with that victory. A lot of what we're seeing, not just Silas Bolden, but it's guys picking up for one another. And I thought Michael Taft had a great, comment on this after the game last night as well. He said, you know what, we're doing fine, we're doing well, and us sitting here talking about this defense only allowing 3 touchdowns through 6 games, that's great. But there's ways that we need to pick each other up more on the football field. There's ways that we're going to improve. And that's just kind of how this mindset's been so far in 2024. And again, for Bolden to kind of come in and that 2023 play in TCU, Gerry, I think that was maybe the highlight of the entire season, right? That single play probably defined what Texas football was taking the step in the right direction towards. For a guy to come in from a different program immediately, adopt that kind of mindset, and then come into a big game like this and see that similar type of effort, it's massive for Texas.
I love it. I got to say also 2 other guys who put their stamp on this rivalry, in my opinion, Trey Wisner and Anthony Hill, and maybe even a third, Gunnar Helm. Those 3 guys all stepped up in different ways. Helm led the team in receiving 5 catches for 91 yards. Trey Wisner had 2 big runs, including the one that put Texas up 21-3 before the half. And then Anthony Hill, what a ball game. If Gabe Eichert, the former OU player now in the media, wants to say anything negative about Anthony Hill again, please do so before Texas plays a big game, because I liked how that worked out for the Longhorns. Guys, heroes made. Those guys, in y'all's opinion, heroes on Saturday?
Trey Wisner, absolutely. Yeah, I think, again, you look at how sluggish the Texas running game was and the Texas offense in general in that first quarter against Oklahoma. Again, it looked very much like 2021 Iowa State. And we all know how gross and, upsetting it was to even watch that game. Three and outs in the first 5 possessions for the Longhorns. There was nothing really going. And then Trey Wisner started seeing touches, and you saw him kind of create out of nothing. And at first it was just a 5 or 6 yard carry, and then he got loose. And my thing with Trey Wisner that gets me really excited is his style of running matches what Texas wants to do so well with that run game. It's let me be patient, let me sit behind the offensive line, and let me hit immediately when the hole is ready. It's not necessarily get the ball and go, but again, every time in the last 2 weeks, he's up 220 yards rushing in the last 2 weeks, 8.9 yards per touch. I think you take that 9 times out of 10 if you're a Texas running back. And again, he's been tremendous the last 2 weeks in SEC play. I think that we're starting to see that true balance of Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner right now with the load and the carries kind of split right now. It's been tremendous for Texas to have that rushing presence with CJ Baxter, done for the year.
Gerry, you want to take any of those guys?
Yeah, so I'm going to say this. I'm going to spin it to recruiting for a second. This is why DFW has been so important to Texas. Last week it was Colin Simmons dominating. This week it was Anthony Hill. Those guys were both going to play in the SEC. The question was, were they going to play for Texas or not? And then you have Trey Wisner. Then you have Cam Williams and DJ Campbell on the right side of the offensive line. Your toughest players on this team, maybe your 3 of your biggest playmakers, not the biggest, but 3 of your biggest playmakers, they're all from this DFW targeted area that Sark and Banks and Chris Gilbert, they knew they had to win recruiting. And you see that because let's get real. Anthony Hill came down to Texas A&M and Oklahoma, and he flipped from A&M. DJ Campbell came down to Texas and Oklahoma. Trey Wisner, Cameron Williams, a flip from Oregon, but Texas, Oklahoma, they were both in it for him. These recruiting wins are massive. So we got to always keep that in mind as we cover the next few recruiting classes. These DFW wins are paying huge dividends right now.
Really good point, Gerry. I mean, Anthony Hill, for me, guys, was just unbelievable on Saturday. He played like with his hair on fire. And he really did. CJ, I saw the video you came up with post-game where he planted the flag in the middle of the Cotton Bowl on top of an OU jersey. I think that these Longhorns were fit to be tied. I don't think, we made a little bit about the things that were said previously and all this other stuff. I think that what Brent Venables and Danny Stutzman did last year, quoted a little bit about this game. I think that the Longhorns took that to heart and played with a little something extra on Saturday.
That was karma, man. I mean, they overdid that last year, and I think Texas had fun after the game. I don't think they're going to go on for a month and celebrate this. That's not this type of team. That was a karma kick in the rear.
All right, guys, I think that Anthony Hill was the straw that stirred the drink for the Longhorns defense on Saturday. No doubt about it. Let's talk about a couple other things just in a rapid reactions format. Quinn Ewers' first quarter was befuddling. It wasn't just that he was high on that first pass. It was that he looked like he was really slow. It was more than just rust. It looked like at times. Now, granted, I think he righted himself and took care of the football, but it wasn't necessarily what we thought or have seen from Quinn Ewers in big games previously.
Yeah, it was the opposite of the Michigan game for me. As well as he played to start the Michigan game was as poorly as he played to start the Oklahoma. It was easily the worst offensive quarter Texas football's had in a while. And that was the worst NFL tape he's put out in a while. There was just, and even as the game moved along, and I hate to be hard on somebody when you win a game, but the throw to Wingo in the red zone, I mean, golly, it was just the feet weren't there. If his eyes were seeing something, the feet weren't in time with his eyes. And that caused late throws, that caused high throws. And I don't want to say he was playing not to get hurt, but man, he wasn't stepping into throws in that game. And CJ, the one thing I'll say is, and this is a positive for Texas, 2 of the last 3 games, Texas has had subpar quarterback play. Arch, but it was ULM against Monroe. And then Quinn today, subpart of what we expect from Texas right now. And they've still blown out opponents. So maybe that speaks to how good this Texas team really is, guys.
That's kind of where I was going to go as well. With Quinn, the way that he kind of came out in that first quarter, Gerry, it felt like he didn't trust his offensive line. It felt like that was a guy who, as a quarterback, has gone week in, week out, knowing he was going to get hit about 10 or 15 times. And that's, again, not the confidence that we saw him play with earlier this year, especially against Michigan, who I would say has a much better talented, defensive line. You can argue front seven there, but guys that can get after the quarterback at an NFL level. After the first play, and I think that might have played a little bit of a factor as well, he was sacked on the first play. There was pressure early in that first quarter. Yeah. I think it just took him a much longer time than you expected for him to find that rhythm. And, it wasn't pretty. Again, I think it was one of the worst quarters that we've seen from Quinn, but he did right the ship. And at the end of the game, I looked down and see he's 20 of 29 for, 200 yards. I'm sitting there, I was like, wow, okay, he actually put together a pretty solid day. It might not have felt like it after the first quarter, but again, if you can build on this and come into Georgia back at home, I think you're going to find the Quinn Ewers return to form that we've seen over the past year and a half.
And he's got to, guys. He's got to.
He really does. I think that we're all on the same page there. Because if Texas wants to be the best team they can be, he has to play better. And I think he knows that. One thing I would add to all of this, it felt like to me after the first sack and then the interception right after, almost like he was seeing ghosts, like he hadn't played in a while and it is actually catching up to him. The problem I had is even in the fourth quarter, to Jerry's point, his feet started getting away from him. That ball, that missed pass to Isaiah Bond, that would have been a pretty easy 6 that he didn't step into because I think he was a little worried about the pass rush, et cetera. A lot to go over there and a lot to digest. But this Texas team, he has to take another step if Texas is going to be as good as they need to be to really cement being a great football team. Yeah. All right, next thing, the running back position I wanted to ask you all about. What'd you think of Trey Wisner versus Jaden Blue? 2 different types of running backs we're noticing, even though they're both a little on the slight side. They're very, very different styles of runners. Blue likes to hit it and go. Head down, run as fast as he can to the crease, whereas Wisner kind of hunts and pecks and has actually kind of broken more tackles than you would expect, even with his slight build. Y'all think that Texas is going to keep going this 1-2 punch on offense? Because we didn't see much of Jarrett Gibson on Saturday.
The 1-2 punch is probably what we'll continue to see. How much will that kind of be? Because I like Jaden Blue in a role where you don't see him much. You see him in the field, and then the ball goes to him, and you see the burst, and you see the speed, and you see him in space, and you say, that's what I like to see. I don't know right now if he's going to be a guy like against ULM where he got 25 rush attempts. I don't know if that is best suited for his game right now. And with the way that Trey Wisner is running the football and with the way that he's finding yards, I think is the big thing there. The cutbacks, the vision, the patience, all of that is suited so well for the way that this offensive line kind of develops their run blocks, right? It was kind of the big thing that we saw with Bijan and Roschon. It took some time for those holes to develop, but when it did, and you saw them cut back or you saw them find a sliver that was late developing, that's when the big run was created. And that's very much what we're seeing right now with Trey Wisner. I think you go to him maybe a 60-40 a little bit more so and just use Blue as that guy out of the backfield on passing situations. I don't want to completely, confine Blue to a third down back role because he is valuable and that speed is something that you can't teach. But right now, the hot hand is, 9 yards a touch right now over the last 2 games.
Gerry, you think that you still think that they
Yeah.
go 1-2 punch? I would caution a little bit of what CJ said there. I think they've still got to have two guys carrying the ball because neither Blue nor Trey Wisner are really built for a heavy load, so to speak.
And I think we'll see more Jarrett Gibson as the season moves along too. This was a tough game to bring in a freshman that may not. This is why Cedric Baxter was so rare, because he was so good in pass pro early on that they trusted him on the road at Bama. So Jarrett, I think today pass pro was the issue for him. I expect you'll see more Jarrett Gibson as the season moves along and in a little more of a role. I'm not saying it's going to be like Michigan necessarily, but I think he'll have another game or two like Michigan this year in the SEC. But one thing I like Blue, if he has 12 or 13 touches, let's just say he has 13 touches in a game. I like 8 carries, 5 receptions. I like that to be the number. And because 3 of those receptions are extension of the run game anyways. There weren't any downfield opportunities for him today because of the way Oklahoma was playing the safeties. But if he has 13 touches, I like 8 rushes and 5 receptions with the understanding that he's going to be the guy they run more inside zone with, because I think they want people to fear his ability to get to the second level downhill quickly and maybe try to pull a safety up. But what did Oklahoma do? They're like, no. We're going to keep our safeties back. We're not going to let y'all throw over the top of us. So what did that do? Texas started running counter.
Yeah, I thought Texas played really well and developed the running game over the course of the game. I think Sark saw some things that he liked and kept going back to it. The Wisner on that counter, or whatever you want to call that play, where he kind of hunted and pecked a little bit and showed some patience, maybe a purposeful cutback type attempt was just one of the keys to the game overall. Let me ask you this final thought here on this. Is this Texas defense for real, in y'all's opinion? Or do we have to wait and see more than just Georgia even? Or is this, 3 touchdowns in 6 games? Look, there it wasn't so long ago where Texas was given 3 touchdowns and 3 drives. And, against some teams, they have done it quite a number. And, I know they have not played a prolific offense to date.
Correct.
But still, they're playing pretty darn good.
I think their communication is so good as a unit right now. And I think they're getting such consistency out of your Barron Sorrell type players. That's the thing. And I think Ethan Burke is really, playing well this year too. So they have so many more guys who can make splash plays or behind the line of scrimmage plays, but they have such great communication. And no, look, I'm going to continue to say it because you got to pass all the tests. Nobody graduates in 7th grade. They haven't played an NFL quarterback. That's going to be against Georgia. We'll see what Georgia has at wide receiver. Can Georgia establish a run game against Texas? If they can't, Carson Beck's going to struggle in that game because he's lost his guy, 2 of his top 4 guys now with the off the field issues. But look, you can only play who's put in front of you. And so they've passed all those tests. But you look at the schedule outside of Carson Beck, where's the surefire NFL quarterback they're going to play? Where's the big-time receiver core? What's Kentucky going to look like with Chip Trainium when he gets back at downhill running back for them? But again, where's the NFL quarterbacks on this schedule? So next week's going to be the first look they have at a guy who can make plays consistently with his arm down the field, even though he's been turnover prone this year. But I think the communication is tremendous. I think the combination of what Nance and PK do, I think that meshes really well. And I just think they have more players that can make plays behind the line of scrimmage than they've had at any time during Sark's years in Austin. And I think that's a big, big thing for Texas, because that makes teams fear you a little bit more when you have more guys that can disrupt games and plays.
CJ, Texas defense, legit or not?
I'm going to say absolutely. I think there's not a weak spot right now. If you want to say the inside run, that's fine. Teams aren't going to beat Texas with the inside run, with the way that this offense has been proven to play and perform this year. Look at all 3 levels. You got individual playmakers at all 3 levels right now, and they showed up against Oklahoma yesterday at all 3 levels. Anthony Hill, player of the game. What happened in the secondary? There wasn't a passing offense for Oklahoma. And you could probably attribute that to a freshman quarterback, wide receivers being injured. But they tried shots. They tried the intermediate passing game. There wasn't separation. There wasn't any bust. The communication was on point. I look at Jahdae Barron and Andrew Makuba. There was a intermission or a timeout at one point in the game. I don't know if the TV cameras brought it up or caught it or not, but from the press box, Jahdae Barron is screaming at Andrew Makuba. He's yelling at him. Some sort of miscommunication happened. And it was a play that I don't think gained any yards. I think it was a throwaway. I think it was a sack. Whatever the play was, it didn't hurt Texas. But because there wasn't that continuity and that mesh in the secondary, they got it hashed out immediately in the next 30 seconds as they waited for the next snap. And what happened? Texas ended up forcing a fumble. Texas ended up forcing a punt. Texas ended up dominating defensively against a team that is, quote unquote, supposed to be on their level. Obviously, this defense is suffocating, and it has been 3 touchdowns in 6 games. Sign me up for that every single year, and you're going to be in a pretty good shape moving forward. But again, big test.
I just can't. I look. Preseason, we talked all the way. Were they going to do this? They're going to do that? How are they going to look? If you would have told me that this team would give up 3 touchdowns in 6 games prior to this season, you're right. Sign me up for it every single time. But this far exceeds expectations. I mean, get real. What they've done thus far. Longhorns still, going to end up being most likely number 1 in the country when the rankings come out later today. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about Georgia already. Georgia's on my mind, I guess is the saying. Recruiting Gerry and CJ will take front and center stage a little bit during this week as we start trying to track who all's coming in for this game coming up. But I tell you what, let's enjoy Texas beating OU because this was a thorough butt whipping. Yes, they won last year, but Steve Sarkisian has blown out the Sooners 2 of the last 3 years. 49-0 2 years ago, 34-3 yesterday. I would not want to be Brent Venables in Norman today. I think there's going to be some people questioning why he let go of Dylan Gabriel or didn't fight harder to keep Dylan Gabriel if this was the offense they were going to put out there against the Longhorns or this season.
And I want to say this for rapid reaction. This was a big win for Sark. It was almost, it was almost a must win for Sark. We didn't want to talk about it. We didn't want to talk about it before the game, but 1-3. Again, if they would have lost to this Oklahoma team yesterday, who was putrid on offense, Texas fans would have been fired up on Sark a little bit too. That was a big game for Steve Sarkisian. That was a must win. I didn't want to say it necessarily. It was a must win game for Sark against Oklahoma.
Yeah, I agree because you didn't want to even think about him being 1-3 against the Sooners when the Sooners didn't have their wide receivers, when they didn't look like they had a real quarterback quite yet, at least, and all of those things. And the offensive line that Oklahoma had is just not indicative of what they've been under Bill Bedenbaugh. I mean, not at all. Even when they've gone to the portal in the past, they've looked much better than this, in my opinion. All right, that's going to do it for Rapid Reactions. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel, Gerry Hamilton, our friend Matt Hutchison behind the scenes production. Also, thank you to Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm for their sponsorship of On Texas Football Rapid Reactions each and every week. Reach out to the Lowy Law Firm at lowylawfirm.com if you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, or automobile accident of any kind and think you might be due compensation. They have free consultations, no strings attached each and every time. lowylawfirm.com. Thanks, Adam, for your sponsorship. All right, that'll do it. Longhorns 6-0. Enjoy the big glowing tower from last night. We got a picture up here for you guys as well. Y'all take care, guys.